The battlefield was silent after the war. Smoke drifted like ghosts over broken metal and burning ships. The ground was black with ashes, and the air carried the smell of fire and loss. Among the ruins, one human walked slowly, his armor cracked, his body covered in blood. His name was Commander Ethan Ward, the last survivor of his squad. He had fought for weeks beside the alien race called the Valren, a proud species known for their tall silver bodies and glowing eyes. They were a people of logic and perfection. They believed emotion was weakness and pain was something to be erased, not endured. For them, humans were strange creatures, reckless, fragile, and too emotional to be trusted. But Ethan had changed that. Through countless battles, he had earned their respect, even their fear. Now, limping through the ruined hall of a Valren fortress, Ethan tried to breathe through the pain. Each step sent a sharp sting through his chest. His vision blurred, but he kept walking. His only thought was simple. He had to report that the battle was over, that his team had done their duty. When he finally reached the Queen's chamber, 2 Valren guards lowered their spears. Their glowing eyes widened as they saw him, a human covered in blood, barely standing. The white floor stained red beneath his boots. They had never seen anyone survive such wounds. One guard moved forward, shocked. "Human, you should be dead." Ethan gave a weak smile. "Yeah," he whispered. "I get that a lot." The massive doors opened, and inside sat Queen Celera, ruler of the Valren Empire. Her throne shimmered with pale light, and her golden eyes burned like twin suns. She was tall, graceful, and powerful, a being made of strength and command. When she turned her gaze toward Ethan, her expression shifted from authority to disbelief. For a moment, she said nothing. The chamber was quiet except for the sound of his uneven breathing. Then she rose from her throne and walked slowly toward him. Her steps were soundless, her silver gown flowing like water. "You," she began softly, "you survived the front lines?" Ethan nodded weakly, trying to straighten his back like a soldier. "My squad didn't make it. But the enemy's retreating. It's done." Her eyes narrowed, scanning him from head to toe. Then she noticed the dark hole in his chest plate, the burnt metal around it, and the faint pulse beneath. A wound like that would have killed even a Valren within minutes. "You're still alive," she whispered in shock. "How?" He gave a dry laugh, though it came out as a cough. "Guess humans don't die easy, Your Majesty." The Queen stepped closer, her hand glowing faintly with energy as she examined him. Her technology confirmed what her eyes already knew. The human's heart was failing, torn beyond recovery. Yet somehow the man still stood before her, breathing, talking, even smiling. "This is impossible," she murmured. "Your heart is damaged beyond repair. You should not be alive." Ethan swayed slightly, his vision dimming. "Yeah, well, someone's got to finish the job." He gave a tired grin before collapsing onto one knee. The guards rushed forward, but the Queen lifted her hand. "No, bring the healers immediately." Her voice trembled slightly, something that had never happened before in the history of her reign. As they carried Ethan toward the medical chamber, the Queen followed in silence. Her mind refused to believe what she had seen. The human's body was fragile, weak by every biological standard, yet his will, his spirit, seemed to burn brighter than any flame she had ever witnessed. When they placed him on the healing table, his heartbeat slowed, almost fading. Still, he tried to lift his hand and give a salute. "Did we win?" he whispered. The Queen looked down at him, her golden eyes softening. "Yes, human," she said quietly. "You won." He smiled faintly, his eyes closing as exhaustion took him. For a moment, Celera just stared at him, the small, fragile creature who had defied death itself. "This cannot be real," she whispered again, her voice filled with something strange, not just disbelief, but wonder. And for the first time in centuries, the Queen of the Valren felt something she had forgotten long ago. She felt respect, and perhaps the beginning of fear. Ethan lay in the glowing chamber surrounded by Valren healers. The walls shimmered with soft blue light, and strange machines hummed gently, reading his every breath and heartbeat. Thin silver tendrils floated around his body, repairing flesh, sealing veins, and knitting his torn skin back together. But deep inside, something was terribly wrong. Queen Celera stood beside him, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. Her golden eyes followed every movement of the healers. She had seen death many times. She had seen warriors crushed, burned, vaporized, but she had never seen anyone like this human. One healer looked up, his expression pale. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "the readings make no sense. His heart is torn, completely torn. It's not pumping blood anymore, yet his body still fights." Solera frowned. "Still fights? That is impossible. Life cannot exist without the heart," the healer swallowed. "And yet it does. He should be gone, but something is keeping him here." The queen stepped closer, studying the human's face. His lips were dry and cracked, his skin pale, but his chest still rose and fell. It was faint, uneven, but real. She reached out and placed her glowing hand above his heart. Her healing light spread through his chest, scanning deep inside. The moment she saw the image projected in the air, her body went cold. It was true. His heart had a deep rupture, almost split in half. There was no natural way he could live even a second longer. But she could sense something else. A faint rhythm, not from the muscle, but from his will. His body refused to die because his spirit refused to surrender. "This cannot be real," she whispered again. "No being can resist death this way." Ethan's eyelids fluttered open. His voice was soft, broken. "Still here, huh?" Solera leaned down slightly. "You should not be. No machine, no healing light could hold you together." What are you?" He smiled weakly, the corners of his lips lifting with quiet defiance. "Just human," she frowned. "That word, human, you speak it like it means something greater than your body." "It does," he said, struggling to breathe. "We're stubborn creatures. When we love something, when we fight for it, we don't let go, not even when death comes knocking." Solera studied him, confused and moved all at once. "You risked your life for my people. Why?" "Because they were beside me," he whispered. "Doesn't matter what skin, what shape, what planet. If you fight next to me, you're my people." His words struck something deep inside her, something she had buried long ago. The Valren had lost compassion in their pursuit of perfection. They obeyed logic, not feeling. But this fragile human, bleeding on her table, spoke of loyalty, love, and sacrifice like they were more powerful than any weapon. She turned to her healers. "Keep him alive," she commanded. "No matter what it takes." Hours passed. The machines beeped and the lights pulsed weakly. Ethan's vitals dropped again and again. Each time the healers thought he was gone, his body fought back. It was as if his heart refused to listen to nature itself. Solera stayed there, watching. She could not look away. Each flicker of his heartbeat pulled something inside her, a mixture of awe, fear, and strange admiration. When the night finally quieted, she sat beside him. Her crown lay forgotten on the floor. She had never done that before, not for anyone. She whispered softly, almost to herself. "Why do you fight so hard? What drives you to resist the end?" His voice came, faint but steady. "Because someone has to believe it's not over." Solera blinked. She realized she had been holding her breath. The human's words echoed in her mind like a prayer. She looked at his chest again, glowing faintly under the healing lights. A being who should be dead yet lived. A creature who faced death and laughed in its face. For the first time, the queen of the Valren, a race that feared no war and felt no mercy, felt something she could not describe. It was not pity. It was not admiration. It was something deeper. It was hope. The sun rose over the crystal towers of the Valren capital, bathing everything in silver light. Inside the medical wing, the air was still and quiet. Machines hummed softly beside the human's bed, and thin threads of light continued to pulse through his body. Ethan had been unconscious for 2 days. Every few hours his body would tremble, and the monitors would fall silent. Then somehow his heart would start again, dragging him back from the edge. The healers called it a miracle. But Queen Solera didn't believe in miracles. She believed in science, in proof, in logic, and yet nothing about this human made sense. She stood beside his bed, her golden eyes focused on his pale face. His breathing was shallow, but his expression was peaceful. She couldn't understand how something so fragile could carry so much strength inside. For the first time in many years, the queen felt lost. Her people believed that emotion clouded judgment. They were trained from birth to obey reason, to follow the path of perfection. But this human had broken every rule she knew. He had fought when he should have fallen. He had smiled while bleeding. He had saved her soldiers even when his own life was fading away. She looked down at him and whispered softly, Why would you give everything for a world that isn't yours? Her words went unanswered, or so she thought. Then weakly Ethan stirred. His eyes opened barely. Because someone had to. Celera froze. His voice was barely audible, but his words pierced her heart like a blade. You're awake, she said, stepping closer. You shouldn't even be able to speak, I've a faint smile. Humans are good at doing what we shouldn't. There was a hint of humor in his tone, small but real. She felt something unfamiliar. A warmth in her chest, a pull toward this strange creature. Your kind is strange, she said softly. You risk your life without reason. You care too much. Ethan looked up at the bright ceiling, his eyes half closed. Maybe. But caring gives us strength. It gives us something worth fighting for. Celera tilted her head, trying to understand. Strength through emotion? That is chaos, he shook his head. No, it's purpose. Pain reminds us we're alive. Love reminds us what we're fighting for. You don't need to erase it, you just need to feel it. His words were simple, but they echoed deep inside her. For the first time, the Queen questioned everything she had been taught. The Valren had built their empire on control and discipline. But this one human, lying broken and half dead, spoke of something stronger than any weapon. The will to keep going no matter what. She found herself sitting beside his bed, watching him breathe. Her crown lay forgotten on the table. You're not like anyone I've met, she whispered. He smiled faintly again. That's what they all say. Before I get them into trouble. She almost laughed, and then froze at herself. Laughed. It had been centuries since she had laughed. The sound felt strange but alive, like something reborn inside her. When the healers entered to check the readings, they bowed deeply, surprised to see their queen sitting beside a patient. Celera raised her hand, signaling them to stay quiet. He is not to be disturbed. His strength is not ours to measure. As the healers left, she turned back to him. He had fallen asleep again, his breathing steady. She studied his face, the scars, the roughness, the signs of suffering. He looked nothing like her people, yet she could not deny the feeling growing in her chest. That night, when the chamber was empty, she stayed beside him in silence. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished wall, a powerful ruler now humbled by a dying man. She whispered to herself, if this is what being human means, then perhaps we have been weaker than we thought. Outside, the twin moons of Valra rose, casting soft light across the chamber. The queen of a cold and perfect empire sat beside a fragile being from another world. And for the first time in her long life, she did not feel superior. She felt curious, she felt alive, and deep within her heart, a new question formed, one that would change everything. What if perfection is not strength at all? The peace did not last long. Only a few days after Ethan began to heal, the sound of distant sirens echoed through the Valren capital. Red lights flashed across the corridors, and the calm silver sky darkened with the shadow of approaching warships. Queen Celera stood in the command hall, her golden eyes fixed on the holographic map. The enemy fleet, the same invaders who had attacked before, had returned stronger than ever. Their ships burned through the clouds like falling stars, aiming straight for the heart of the Valren Empire. Her voice was firm, but inside she felt a deep unease. Prepare the defenses. Evacuate the lower cities. No ship enters our airspace. Her generals bowed and ran to obey. But behind her, a weak voice spoke from the doorway. You're going to need me out there. Celera turned sharply. Ethan stood there, still pale, his body wrapped in bandages, a faint limp in his step. He held on to the wall for support, but there was determination in his eyes. You can barely stand, she said sternly. You are in no condition to fight. He smiled faintly. Conditions never stopped me before, the queen frowned. You're reckless. You will die. Ethan looked straight at her. If I die saving lives, then it's worth it. For a moment, she had no answer. His voice carried no arrogance, no pride, just truth. The same truth that had made her question everything she believed. He reached for his armor lying on the table. I promised your soldiers I'd stand with them till the end. I don't break promises. Celera stepped forward and placed a hand on his chest, stopping him. You don't owe us this, he smiled softly. You're wrong. I owe it to everyone who believed I couldn't. Something inside her broke, the wall she had built around her emotions for centuries. She wanted to command him to stay, to rest, to live. But looking into his eyes, she knew he never would. Humans, she realized, were not made to surrender. Moments later, the skies above the capital exploded with light. The battle had begun. Ethan stood on the front lines once more, alongside the Valran soldiers who once doubted him. Their silver armor gleamed beside his scarred, battered human frame. Despite the pain, he fought like a storm. Every blast he fired was precise. Every order shouted with courage. The Valran followed him, inspired by his fire. From the command tower, Solara watched him through the screens. He was everywhere, running through smoke, shielding wounded soldiers, fighting even after being thrown to the ground. Her chest tightened with something she could not name. "He fights as if death cannot touch him," one general whispered. Solara's voice was soft but full of pride. "No, he fights because he believes death should never touch those he protects." The battle raged for hours. The enemy's bombardment shook the sky, but the Valran held their ground. Ethan took a hit to the side. Plasma burned through his armor. But he kept going, shouting for the soldiers to push forward. "Don't stop," he yelled. "We hold this line!" Even bleeding, he stood tall. His legs trembled, his vision blurred, but his spirit roared like fire. The Valran soldiers rallied around him, their courage renewed. They had never seen anyone fight like this. A human whose strength came not from power, but from heart. When the enemy ships finally began to retreat, the entire battlefield fell silent. Smoke drifted through the air, and among the fallen, Ethan still stood, barely. His weapon dropped from his hands as he fell to his knees. From the tower, Solara rushed out with her guards. She found him surrounded by soldiers, his blood staining the ground again. He looked up at her and managed a weak grin. "Guess I did it again," he said with a dry laugh. Solara knelt beside him, her golden eyes shimmering. "You fool," she whispered. "You should have stayed behind." He chuckled softly. "Not my style, Your Majesty." Her hand trembled as she touched his face. "You are hurt beyond measure. Why do you keep pushing your limits?" He looked at her, eyes half closed. "Because if I stop, others fall. That's not how humans work." Solara could only stare at him. A man covered in wounds, still smiling through the pain. Her soldiers bowed their heads around him, silence spreading like a prayer. As she called for the medics, she whispered to herself, almost in disbelief. This cannot be real." And yet deep in her heart, she knew it was, because what she was seeing was not just a man, it was humanity itself, refusing to surrender even when the universe demanded it. The medical hall was filled with tension and the sharp smell of healing vapors. Ethan lay on the bed again, his armor shattered and body covered with new burns. His breathing was faint, slower than before. The machines around him flickered as if unsure whether to keep fighting or give up. Queen Solara stood by his side, her golden eyes fixed on his still face. The room around her was full of movement, healers rushing, machines beeping, voices calling out instructions. But to her, it all felt distant. All she could see was the man who had stood between death and her people once again. "His heart rate is dropping," one healer shouted. "We're losing him." Solara's hand clenched tightly. She had seen soldiers die before. She had seen friends fall in war. But this felt different. Every time Ethan's breath slowed, something inside her twisted painfully. "Do something," she ordered. The healer looked up helplessly. "We've done everything possible, Your Majesty. His body cannot endure anymore. His heart is beyond repair." Solara's voice trembled for the first time. "You said that before." "Yet he lived. He will live again." Her guards exchanged worried glances. The Queen of the Valran, known for her calm, for her strength, for her unbreakable logic, now sounded desperate. She turned back to Ethan and whispered softly, "Human, open your eyes. You said you don't quit, so don't you dare quit now." Ethan's face remained still. Only the slow, weak rhythm of the machine gave any sign of life. Solara's vision blurred. For a second, she didn't understand what she felt. Her chest ached. Was this pain, fear, or something else? She reached out and placed her glowing hand over his wound, letting her healing energy flow into him. At first, it did nothing. Then faintly, his heartbeat flickered back. The healers gasped. But Solara didn't stop. Her power grew brighter and brighter, flowing from her hand into his body. "Your Majesty, stop," one healer cried. "You're giving too much energy. It will drain your life force." But Solara ignored them. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her silver cheeks. He gave everything for us, she whispered. Now I will give for him. Her body trembled as the energy transfer continued. The light around them filled the entire room, turning everything white. Her guards tried to pull her away, but the energy was too strong. It surrounded her like a storm. Ethan's body jerked as his heart began to beat stronger. His chest rose again, but as he grew stronger, the queen began to fall. When the light finally faded, the healers rushed forward. Ethan was alive, his color returning, his heartbeat steady, but Celera collapsed beside him, her skin pale and her crown falling from her head. "Your Majesty," the healers cried out, catching her before she hit the ground. And Ethan's eyes fluttered open. The bright lights hurt his eyes, but when he turned his head, he saw her lying motionless beside him, his heart clenched in panic. "No, no, no," he whispered, forcing himself to sit up despite the pain. "What did you do?" "She gave you her energy," the healer said softly. "She saved your life, at the cost of her own." Ethan's hand shook as he reached for her. "Celera," he said weakly. "Why would you do that?" Her lips moved faintly, barely a whisper. "Because you taught me what it means to care." Then her eyes closed. Ethan felt something break inside him. For the first time, the man who had faced death without fear felt truly helpless. He gripped her hand tightly, his tears falling onto her silver skin. "No," he whispered again. "You're not dying. Not after everything we fought for." He pressed his forehead against hers. "If you could give your life for me, then I'll find a way to give it back." Around him, the healers watched silently as the human held their queen, his voice full of grief and determination. They had seen him defy death before, but this time, it wasn't just for battle. It was for her. And as his tears fell onto her still hand, a faint spark of light glimmered between them. Small, fragile, but alive. The room was quiet after the storm of light. The healers stood frozen, unsure what to do. Queen Celera lay motionless on the floor, her skin pale, her golden eyes closed. The glow that always surrounded her was gone. It was as if the very life had been drained from her body. Beside her, Ethan sat weakly, breathing heavily. His wounds were healed, but his heart ached in a way he couldn't understand. He looked at the queen and the proud, strong ruler who had fought to save him and saw only stillness. "She's gone," one healer whispered. "Her energy is spent. She gave it all to you." Ethan shook his head slowly. No, she's not gone." He reached out and touched her cold hand. It felt heavy, lifeless. His throat tightened. "You gave your life to save mine," he whispered. "That's not how this story ends." He tried to stand, but his body was weak. He pressed his forehead against hers, his voice breaking. "You called me reckless. And maybe I am, but you don't get to die because of me." The healers looked at him with pity. "Human, your energy cannot reach her. She is beyond healing." Ethan ignored them. His eyes filled with tears, but there was something else too. That same stubborn fire that had carried him through every battle. "I don't care what your machines say. I'm not letting her go." He placed both hands over her chest and closed his eyes. He didn't have the glowing powers of the Valren, or their perfect control of energy. But he had something they didn't. The will to fight when logic said it was over. He focused on the rhythm of his heartbeat. Each pulse echoed through his body, through his soul. Slowly, he imagined that rhythm flowing from him into her. The healers stepped back as a faint shimmer appeared between their hands. "What is he doing?" one whispered. "Something no human should be able to do," another answered softly. Ethan's breathing grew heavier. Sweat rolled down his forehead, but he didn't stop. He whispered her name over and over, his voice shaking. "Celera, come back. You're not done yet. You still have a world to lead." Minutes passed. The lights of the machines flickered wildly. Then suddenly one of them beeped. Once, then again. The healers stared at the readings. Her vitals. "They're returning." Ethan didn't hear them. He just kept going, pushing every ounce of energy he had into her. His body trembled, his vision blurred, but he refused to stop. "You saved me," he whispered, "so I'll save you, even if it kills me." Then a soft glow began to spread from their joined hands. It was faint at first, like a candle flame, but soon it grew brighter, warmer. The queen's chest began to rise and fall again. Her pale skin regained its silver shine. Ethan opened his eyes just as she took a sharp breath. Her fingers twitched and her golden eyes fluttered open, confused and weak. "Ethan," she whispered. He smiled faintly, his voice breaking. "Told you. I don't quit." The healers gasped in awe. The queen looked around slowly, realizing what had happened. You gave your life energy to me. He nodded weakly. Guess it's fair. You gave me yours first. Her eyes filled with something rare, emotion. A soft tear rolled down her cheek. She reached up and touched his face. You foolish, impossible human. He laughed softly. Takes one miracle to save another. Celera tried to sit up, but her body trembled. Ethan steadied her, even though his own strength was nearly gone. The two sat together, surrounded by silent healers who couldn't believe what they had witnessed. For generations, the Valryn believed that emotion made them weak, that compassion drained power. But in that moment, they saw something no science could explain, a connection born not of energy, but of heart. Celera turned to her healers. Let it be known, she said softly, her voice trembling but strong. This human saved his queen, not with strength, not with power, but with something greater, the will to love. The healers bowed deeply. Overcome with awe, Ethan smiled faintly, exhaustion finally taking him. You're gonna be fine now. Celera caught him as he began to fall, pulling him close. Rest, Ethan, you've done enough. He smiled one last time before slipping into sleep, his head resting on her shoulder. She looked down at him, this strange, reckless man who had changed her forever, and then whispered, You truly are impossible. And as she held him close, the room filled with quiet light once more, not from machines or power, but from two hearts that refused to let go. Days passed after the healing chamber incident. The news of what happened between the human and the queen spread across the Valryn Empire like fire through dry leaves. Every palace, every colony, every outpost whispered the same words. The human brought the queen back from death. No one had ever heard of such a thing. Not even the oldest records spoke of a Valryn being saved by another's life energy, and certainly not by a human. Inside the royal garden, the queen sat silently beside a lake of silver water. Flowers bent slightly toward her, as if they could feel her presence again. Her once faint glow had returned stronger than ever, yet her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon, where the twin suns were setting. Beside her lay Ethan, resting peacefully under the care of the healers. His body was weak, but his heart still beat strong. He had not woken since the day he gave his energy to her. Celera watched him quietly. Each breath he took made her chest tighten. You gave me life, she whispered softly. Now I must give you peace. For the first time, the mighty queen felt small, not because she had lost power, but because she had witnessed something greater than power. She remembered the way he had looked at her, not as a ruler, not as a goddess, but as a friend who mattered. When he finally opened his eyes, it was night. The soft light of the moons reflected on the lake. He blinked slowly and smiled. Hey, still here? The queen turned to him quickly, her golden eyes shining. You should be resting. He chuckled weakly. You sound like my doctor. Celera smiled, a rare, gentle smile that none of her people had ever seen. You scared me, she said softly. He looked at her with tired eyes. Guess we're even then. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then he whispered, Why did you save me, Celera? You could have let me die. The queen looked up at the stars, her voice low. Because you reminded me what it means to care. My people forgot that long ago. Ethan smiled faintly. Then, I did something right. She turned toward him, her expression soft and proud. You did more than right. You changed us. The next morning, the queen stood before her entire court. Thousands of Valryn gathered in the grand hall. Soldiers, scholars, nobles, all waiting to see the queen who had returned from death. When she entered, silence filled the chamber. Her golden armor gleamed like sunlight, but there was something new in her, warmth. She raised her hand for silence. My people, she began, her voice clear. We have lived believing strength is found in control. But I have seen something greater. A human, one of those we thought weak, showed me what true strength is, the crowd murmured. Some looked confused, others uneasy. Celera continued, her tone firm yet emotional. When I fell, he did not run. When I was dying, he gave what little he had, not because of duty, but because of love and loyalty. He saved me, not as a soldier, as a friend. She turned and gestured toward Ethan, who was brought in by two healers. Though pale, he stood straight, meeting the gaze of an entire alien empire without fear. This human, she said, her voice rising. "We'll forever be remembered as the one who reminded us what it means to live with heart." The hall erupted into a mix of awe and disbelief. Then slowly, one Valran warrior stepped forward, lowering his head in respect. Another followed. Then hundreds more bowed deeply to the human. Ethan looked at Celera, surprised. "You didn't have to do this," she smiled softly. "No, Ethan, I wanted to. Because you taught me that kindness is not weakness and its power we forgot." He chuckled weakly. "Guess humanity's good for something after all." The queen stepped closer and rested her hand over his heart. "More than good. You're proof that courage needs no crown." Tears shimmered in her golden eyes as she spoke the final words. "From this day you will be known among us as Ethan the Heart of Fire, the human who gave light to the queen." The hall roared with applause that shook the very walls. For the first time in Valran history, they cheered not for a conqueror but for compassion. As the sound faded, Ethan smiled faintly.